Welcome back to the Central Impact podcast that we've been doing to help families with their financial wellness for emergencies all the way through life events. Today, we are going to focus on financial planning for major life events. That can include things like buying your first home, emergencies that come up, marriage, having children. Oh, those kids then need to go to college. How do I plan for that? Retirement. And then also the other thing going on out there is all of a sudden you become a solo member or financial winner. Divorce, death, those things all play into it. Those are other major life events. So, welcome, panel, to the discussion today. I'm going to ask you guys a few questions as we go over this planning for major life events and see what your thoughts are. So, the first question: what financial planning advice would you give to someone getting married?
Well, it's a great question, Larry. And I'll tell you, having been in practice for 25 years, this is a topic that comes up a lot. And one of the key things that I would recommend to my clients who have children who are getting married or just newly married is for them to take a financial class. Because one of the things that is really key to understand is that you have both parties and they may have grown up with very different views on money, have very different backgrounds in money. And it really, really helps if you can go through a class where it basically asks you to discuss how that impacted you, as well as what you would see each of your roles in the financial picture of your marriage to look like and what your goals are, because those are huge. Communication and understanding is really, really key.
I think when considering getting married, not even the financial class is one of the first things I agree with Debbie 1,000%, but also communication. What are your big ideas, your big philosophies about how money is done or finances are done in a household, and where, what are priorities? Are priorities, you can go from anything from we need a house cleaner, or our house cleaned every week. That could be one person's priority, and the other person says, "Well, not really." So having those conversations and really understanding what the main priorities of each member of the marriage is, I think, is critical and crucial before moving forward, with the marriage and having and getting that communication.
Yeah, the further what Richard is saying is, clarify the goals. Uh, you know, is going on vacation every year important? Is saving for your first house important? What do you want with the kids? Do you want to send them to a private education or a public education? So really getting clear on your goals. And then as Richard points out, is assigning priorities to your goals, I think is really critical. But it comes back to communication. It all starts with talking because money is one of the leading causes of divorce. So if you don't have the conversations, you not necessarily will get divorced, but it may not help you.
I agree with that. Communication is important. I'm going to rewind a little bit even before you're talking about marriage and the fact that pay attention to your partner when you're in the dating process as well. There's a lot of joy. There's a lot of the honeymoon thing, but being married as long as I have, I think back to when I met my wife, and it's like, man, there's some things that she does today that just irritates me financially, right? She has a purse fetish. Well, if I was paying attention when I was dating and not the honeymoon, I would have realized she had that before I met her, right? When we would go shopping, her first place was she went to the purse aisle. I wasn't paying attention. A lot of things I wasn't paying attention to as a young man that I pay attention to now. We've got it under control, but it's those little things, those little cues, like the guy that I see throwing the, hey, let's go to dinner, and he's throwing a $2,000 dinner out there, but he's only working at Home Depot. So how frugal is he with his money in that situation? Those are things to kind of raise some flags to then open that communication about what you guys were talking about, where to go. But there's little hints you can get at the start to find out where that person's sitting. And really quick, and I'll end on this, is that my wife told me a story when we were dating that when she got in trouble for not cleaning her room, her dad got mad at her. Well, that afternoon, he was so upset that he got mad at her that he went and bought her a new bike. Okay, that is not the way I got handled when I was being brought up, right? I got in trouble and there was no little pat on the back, oh, sorry at the end. But that went to how she does finances too, right? So we had to work through all of those issues, and those popped up early in the marriage. So we worked through them. They're workable, but pay attention early in your relationships. Okay, what about financial planning? So now you're married. We talked about that, but then all of a sudden you become solo. So you didn't work out your issues, right? I hate that D word, but you didn't work out your issues, or somebody, and it's two D words actually, right? Divorce and death. So somebody passes away, whether you planned that or didn't plan that. How do you plan for those occurrences to make sure you're doing what you need to from a financial wellness perspective? Richard, do you want to start?
Yeah, this is something that is fresh for me since my divorce was finalized just a few months ago. So, or exactly 1 year ago, actually, it was finalized. So, it's been 1 year of transition and you know, finding a new place to live, and you know, when you separate things like all the furniture. I didn't get the kitchen table, so I now have to figure out what I'm doing with that. So all of those costs and everything, planning for it, once again, that is a lot of sit down communication, going through all of the family, all of the, you know, mutual assets that are there. And you know, a lot of times, depending on what state you're in, you might have to make a very itemized list of everything and where it goes and everything else. So that really helped a lot of the planning for the becoming solo. Of I knew what I was going to start needing when, you know, everything was done, and when we, you know, separated and sold the house and started on our own journeys, you know, apart. And so once, I really do think it goes back to communication and figuring that out, and that really helped with those months of negotiations and everything else. That gave me a lot of breathing room with the lawyers talk, in order to figure out, okay, what are my next steps? How much do I have? What is the savings going to be when we split it? How much am I going to have in order to do that? So all comes down to communication, at least on the divorce, you know, side. I don't, my spouse did not pass away, so I don't know anything about the other D word, you know, but divorce, I know that it's a lot of communication and a lot of planning.
Oh boy, sorry about that. so, so yeah, to further what Richard's saying is, you know, it's about goals. The other thing that Richard was starting to talk about too is being organized and knowing your resources. And that's tracking your numbers, that while you're married, while you're single, you know, at any stage of your life, doing a cash flow statement. I am avoiding the word budget here because some people are not into budgets, but you have to know your income, you have to know your expenses, you have to know how much you have in your different accounts. And once you've got that organized and you're monitoring it, then you can set the goals as you go through a transition, because you'll know what resources you have to draw upon. So, you know, it still is the same thing happens. You're just, if you have a plan, you just make adjustments to your plan as you go.
Yeah, those are great points, guys. I really appreciate you talking about that. Another area that could use some focus on in your marriage, again, financial parts, as we know, is such a key part of it. And I've seen this so many times in my practice where one party or the other takes charge of the finances. And that is not, I mean, that is, one is generally better than the other. I mean, it come to them easier. But one of the things that I would recommend to people is that you both need to be involved, because finances are very practical, but they are also very emotional. And so that can create hidden tensions. And so both of you being involved in it is really, really key. And it also helps you understand, as has been so clearly shared, that you know what you have, You know, not only just your financial assets, but your non-financial assets, which can be a significant amount. You need to know what your insurance policies look like. You need to know what your pensions look like. All of those different things are helpful. And I will tell you that that is important, you know, if in the event that the marriage does not survive, and having that understanding before you get to the emotional chaos part of it is huge, because I've seen that where couples of families come in and they're like, you know, at the point when divorce is happening, there's generally not a lot of people being happy about it, and so everybody's kind of jockeying for their corner, and it really does create just a lot more angst. And I mean, I think Charles could probably speak to the emotional side of that as well. And then the other one I would talk about, the suddenly solo on the death. And this is something that has been such a hot button for me, and I see this so often, is we never know. We don't know when our last day is. And I encourage people, get a will in place. Get your healthcare directive in place. Because I will tell you that I've seen this personally when both of my parents were divorced when I was 24. They both remarried. Both of my step parents died within 90 days of each other. That was a rough year. My one side of the family had their stuff in place, and it was grieving, but not a lot of chaos. The other side did not, and it was total mayhem for a year. I just had a friend of mine pass away unexpectedly, and there are a huge amount of estate questions that are going to be really complicated now, because certain things that could have easily been put into place, will, transfer of assets, putting things into trust, not into trust, whatever those are, they weren't done. And depending on what state you live in, dying intestate is a big deal, because then the court gets involved. And it's especially important if you're younger, because I hear people say, oh, you know, I'm not going to die for a while. If you are younger and you have children, you really want to make sure that you have a will, if you know, not only for the you know, how things are going to go, but for the guardianship of your children, because otherwise the state takes over. So those are just the key things that I can think of right off the top of my head.
So I'm gonna reiterate what you just said, Deb, about age, because I have a lot of friends that, you know, we're getting in the 50, 60 range, and you talk to them and they still haven't done it, right? Oh, I got time. I got time. But I've had, you know, my best friend's wife got leukemia and died within 3 weeks, and she was 35. So you never know when or what's going to happen. So getting it out in front, that needs to be something that's planned for more critically than, oh, I don't have the money right now. I don't have the money. Put some money away for savings, because it's not the cheapest thing to get done, but it's not the most expensive thing either, but it's very important. Tony, you wanted to add?
Yeah, you know, Deb brought up a really important point is there's going to be a huge transfer of wealth to women over the next 20 years. Women live generally 7 to 8 years longer than men, and they're going to control a significant amount of assets. So if you're a woman, you know, you can feel like you can take control of your money, and it's a good idea. You know, I recommend that families have family financial meetings where you check in, you know, once a month, once a quarter, whatever. But both parties, you know, like Deb, like you were saying, are involved and know what's going on, because, you know, it's usually been a male role to manage the money in a couple, but, you know, women can definitely manage money as well, and should take on that role, because whether they want to or not, they're going to be in that role of running their financial life at some point.
Charlie, about, you know, the emotional impact of divorce, death, and things like that. Where do you see pitfalls sometimes that people might end up with?
Well, in divorce, I would say like it can get the most like ne emotionally in a negative way if there's contempt or jealousy. I've seen it within personal examples as well as like just reading is that obviously if there's a big wealth discrepancy in the couples, there can be a lot of jealousy, and that can lead to a lot of negative, animosity between the two, and really pushing to get assets from one another at the expense of the kids, especially. Or if there's contempt where you don't really care, about like how the other is faring on that side. Um, Obviously, if contempt or jealousy are not in place, it can be a lot more cordial and amicable of a divorce, and things can be settled a lot more easily. And then as well as losing one, grief, like guilt, there can be survivor's guilt. And the biggest issue could be if someone starts to impulsively spend or, do things to kind of fill up that gap. So, in that situation, it becomes really important, to try to like deal with it in the best way you can. I mean, if you've been married for a while, it can be very difficult to do, but to not resort to impulsive spending is a way to cope with that. And that could be either seeing therapy. I know people in the clinic I work at, that have really struggled after suffering a big loss, but are there trying to cope with it and grieve more appropriately. So there's, there's other options to do aside from using like spending money um, to try to fill up that gap. But yeah, the biggest thing is to not become impulsive, and to kind of see what your goals are, and also to address everyone. In divorce, the kids are involved. It can be really tough on the kids if you're more focused on, getting at each other, and you're not seeing, okay, like, is this breaking down communication with our kids? Like you have to kind of see things holistically. When you get emotional, it's hard to do that. So the most important thing is, okay, what do I want to achieve? Who are all the parties involved, and what's the best for them? Um, and move from there.
It was interesting that you bring that up about the children, Charlie. So the most amicable one that I saw, divorce-wise, was the two adults were fighting like cats and dogs over every single dime. But they had a lawyer that was counseling, I think it was him, and he goes, why don't we do this? Instead of bickering over all this little nickel and dime stuff, why don't we, first of all, address the kids and their financial needs? And let's come to agreement on the kids. So they could amicably got to that point, right? Set some money aside for the kids. They're going to college, they're all that stuff. They're currently in school, both of what their incomes were. So they did that part. Then the parents could fight over that, all of the other stuff, and it kind of kept the kids out of the fray. So it's just an example that I saw worked out pretty good, but the two didn't get along at all. Deb, you had one more thing, and then I'm going to move to the next question.
Perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to give another example, just a quick example. This was years ago when I first started as a CPA. I was at the accounting firm, and we had a couple that came to our firm, and then he developed cancer, and he had managed everything, literally everything, financial, took care of the house, everything. And his wife, he adored his wife, but he knew he only had 4 to 6 months. They came into the firm, came into my office, and she had this binder. In this binder, he had listed on separate pages everything that she needed to think about financially, where the bank accounts were, who she needed to talk to. If you have this particular situation, please go talk to this person. If you have this situation, go talk to this person. And on every single one of those pages, he wrote a love note to his wife. And I'll tell you, for 2 years afterwards, she would come in after he passed, and she would bring this with her. And she would just say, and I'm sorry, but Charles, his name was Charles. Charles told me that I needed to do this. And I still remember that to this day, because that single binder not only cemented his love for her, but also his care for her after he was no longer there. So I just wanted to share that as a story about how things can be done. Even when if somebody develops cancer or something like that, you can do things fairly quickly. But it's just understanding that it's the legacy you leave afterwards that is really important, whether it's in divorce or whether it's in death.
So very good. So to recap that was a lot covered in that section. So we talked about paying attention when you first start dating, so that you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Look at some of the signs, and then start that communication. Keep that communication open from start to finish. maybe take a financial literacy class together so that you get yourselves on the same page. That's just going to strengthen things out so that as you go down the road, and then plan for life events that are going to cause issues like a potential death or um, potentially divorce. I mean, that's harder to plan for, but if somebody passes away, knowing what your plan was, what the ideas were around it, so that it's easier to execute through that. So very good topic, very good coverage of that question. So the second question: how should one approach financial planning for retirement differently from other life events?
Yeah, so I think we need to reframe the word retirement. I've been using the terminology financial independence because that's what your goal really is to have enough money that you don't need to work or that you're dependent upon your income. And if you think of it that way, yeah, it is a completely different goal, but it's part of the rest of your goals that you can have. So if you're thinking about that, then you can, because I don't know anybody who stopped working completely on their 65th birthday. That just doesn't happen. People either retire early, they work longer, maybe they cut back on the number of hours. So it's about thinking again about your goals and then how you're going to fund those goals, and then making sure that there's enough money that you can live off the income, whether that's through passive income. We talked pre-show, and we'll definitely get into Social Security and some of the other things. But are you going to be able to support yourself? Because that's what your real goal is.
Tony, that's a great way. I love that. Financial independence, right? Golden years financial independence, right, is really what it's about. And I think that's just a totally great way to see it, because it's interesting in working with families and especially young people. I used to go in and teach in my daughter's classes because the teachers would say, "Hey, could you come in and teach people about retirement?" And first thing you do is you walk in and you say, "Okay, how many of you want to be a millionaire by the time you're 30?" Everybody's hand goes up. So you got their attention. And then it's talking to them about, because that's what they think. All right, I'm young, I'm 16, I'm 20, I'm 25. Me thinking about not working, I haven't even started working yet. So me thinking about stop working, that's like in another lifetime. I'm immortal at this point, and none of that's I'm not going to have to worry about it. But, as Tony said, thinking about how much money we're going to have in retirement and how we want our retirement to look, what do we want to do with that, is an aspect of life where we really, if we wait until we're 50 to start thinking about it, the chances of us actually being able to achieve it goes down dramatically. So, I like to tell the kids about the time value of money, because that's really where this comes in handy. You can, if you start young, you can actually, invest in things that are a little riskier and have the time to recover if things don't go quite the way you want it, and allow that growth to happen. And it's beautiful to be able to show a chart. And we actually show it in one of our classes, where if you start out early, it kind of goes this, and it looks like this number, and then all of a sudden it starts to do this, and it takes off like a rocket. And once it reaches that point, then they can actually start to see growth with less money put in. They allow interest and time to work for them. And the other thing I would tell people is, if you are working for a place and you have a 401k and you have a match, by golly, try to get every dime of that you can, because that's free money. And all of those things add up. So those are just a couple of tips that you can do to help you put some more money in that nest egg. Because as we talked about before the show started, we all can't depend on Social Security being here. Or if it is, it might look different in 5 to 10 years. And as Tony said, people are living longer. And if we don't plan for living longer, it's probably not going to be as comfortable as we want it to be.
Very nice. So I'm going to actually switch gears a little bit, because we've had two people that have worked in the financial space somewhere comment. And then there's me, right, that doesn't have that background. And I hate doing taxes. I hate doing budgets. I do them. I know how to do them. I do them. But now you're telling me I got to think about my retirement. So the advice I'm going to give you is talk to people in your community, in your church, your friends. I mean, Deb and I are great friends, so I bounce ideas off of her. She's not my CPA tax accountant, but when I get somebody that throws something at me, I got somebody to go to that say, "Hey, does this make sense?" Because a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. So, I get different ideas thrown at me. Look at a financial planner that they take a percentage of how much money you make if you're not good with the stocks. And I'm not a day trader and I don't do any of that stuff. I want to put my money in a mattress and watch it grow, but it doesn't grow in a mattress. So it's got to go somewhere, right? You got to do something that's intelligent. Well, if you're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, how much time do you have to go research all that other stuff? So find somebody that you trust, but don't just go with that one idea. Very quick story. I redid some finances on me for my independent thing. And come to find out, we had a falling out, and I went to somebody else and they go, "What are you doing? That was the dumbest advice you ever got." And that's because I wasn't talking to other people. I wasn't talking in the community. So now I have some trusted people that I can bounce an idea off. And it's not that hard for me anymore because now I'm leveraging experts to handle me getting there with my input and going in the right direction. So build those relationships, find them in church, find them in your community. People love to give advice. You just got to find people you can trust to get that advice from.
There are so many other things to look at. You're right, we're living longer, and so then I think one of the main questions is, at what age do I think I'm going to probably need to become financially independent? Is that I mean, is that 55 because I've been working in construction with my body and I've got arthritis or whatever. My body took a hit throughout my career, or is it more I can work till 65, 70, and then I think that helps you plan for how long you're going to need to be financially independent.
So you brought up something there, and I know Tony mentioned it earlier, and that is goals and dreams. So, right, those are really critical when you're trying to do these major life events. And we haven't talked about that a lot, but if you have no idea where you want to go, you're never going to get there. So when I was working, my target date was 55. I didn't make it, but I missed by 2 years. Well, if I hadn't have thought about that when I was younger and had that dream of I wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do at 55, wasn't going to retire, right? But I would be financially independent, as Tony says, so that I could do things that I wanted to do, like this program, like working more with the church, like learning how to fly, all those things I couldn't do because I was working full time. If I wouldn't have planned and set goals around all of that stuff, I would have never got there. So I can't overemphasize enough that in this topic that we're talking for major life events, when you're doing that communication, what are your dreams, you and your partners or yours, and then set goals so that you can get there. Tony, you had more to add.
Yeah, I want to expand upon what you were saying, Larry, because I think that's wonderful advice is to talk to multiple people to get a lot of ideas. But I think that can also be dangerous as you have to make sure that who the source of the advice is and if they're able to give the advice. So as you point out, Larry, there's some great advice you can get from your friends' perspective. But if there's specific advice you need, you might want somebody like Deb, who is a CPA. And the way to think about it is to think of it in a first aid perspective. If you get a cut at home, you're going to be able to put on a Band-Aid. But if you have a big gash on your arm, you're going to go to the emergency room. So you have to think about all those things is what is your level of comfort, when you're talking about something, because, as Larry points out, you can learn some things from your friends that may take your skills to another level. But at a certain point, you're going to need to get advice from an expert. And in our world, there's so many people giving out so much what seems to be great advice is you have to take a look at and understand, are they a biased source? Do they have credibility? Do they have authority? So yeah, go out and be curious and talk to people and find out things.
I agree 100% with you, Tony. And I'll just add this one little thing is that because they have a title behind their name does not mean that they are an expert. because the advice I got that put me on the wrong path came from my tax accountant for 5 years. And then I started talking to people and they're like, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? So I started asking other people questions. And then I went to my other people that are CPAs and they said, you lost your mind, son. That was bad advice. So I agree with you, Tony.
The old adage I ever heard was when you're young, 100%, full risk when you're in your 20 or whatever, or 75-25, but you can put a lot of it in the high risk because if this is going to go for a very long time, it'll even out, but with the ups and downs and the lows. But I just loved that. That was great.
Yeah. So I'll add one thing to what we've been saying here, just so that people are sure, is you're never too old to start. Just want to make sure, because it's like, well, I'm not young anymore and I'm 40. What do I do now? Start. The first step is start. And then you can start working on what do you need to put away, how much you're going to pension, things like that. What are the financial challenges when buying a home? The first and most obvious is the price right now, right? Because home values have really done a hockey stick up. And so now there's more down payments that are needed. There's PMI, insurance, taxes, everything went up. So where do I go for that? What's my options?
Yeah,
First
right.
time home buyer. Definitely look into somebody can help me out here. FSA, I believe it's the FSA, where it is designed to help families buy their first home with a much lower down payment in actual cash that they would need in order to buy their first, for a starter home, forever home, or whatever the case might be. I just did that a few years ago, and wow, did it help out, getting there and not ending up in the situation that the term has been coined for decades, so many years, of being house poor, that you took all of your money for that down payment and all of that money to get the house, and now you have nothing when you move into the house, and it takes a little while to recover. But if you're buying your first house, that is something to definitely look into, because the federal government is there to help out with that.
I'm going to jump on that a little bit, as I've dealt with several families dealing with getting their first house. And one of the pieces of advice that I give is, first of all, your first house is not the Porsche, right? So start small, even if you're tight, get something that you can afford, because housing price, God's not making more dirt. So the price is going to go up. If you take care of it, the price is going to go up, and then you trade in. So when I started out, I bought it. We had 3 kids. I bought a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house to get started in. Was it perfectly ideal? No. We put the 2 boys in one room, the girl in the other room, and we kind of slept in the middle of the living room. We didn't have a formal living room, but that equity came out. And then what do? You sell that, you take the equity in it, you buy something a little bigger, and you work your way up. So you don't have to start with the big mansion. You don't need the 5 acres and the 3-car garage and all of that in your first house. Buy something, get started, and then progress up. And I'm not saying every year go buy a new house. What the market dictates, make your plans, make your goals, do some more savings, get in the market, but then move your way up in that market.
Larry, that's a great point. I know our first house was 800 square feet. It wasn't very big. It wasn't very pretty, but it was the roof was dry. It was warm, and it was a great place to start. And we just kept going, and we are now to the point where we want to go the other way again. So it's a cycle, right?
I just did that over the last I think it's been exactly 5 or 5.5 years, where I bought my first starter house in Dallas, 1,500 square feet, small, not a big mansion with a little tiny backyard, and but it was a great learning experience of how much is water going to cost, how much is electric going to cost for a house. I've only been in an apartment, I didn't know, so that was a great learning experience to then know, if we buy bigger, the electric is going to go up, water is going to go up. So how much bigger can we afford to take, like Larry was saying, to take the equity out, of that house, and then you get the next one. But it really is a marathon. It's not a sprint to who can get the biggest house, as their first house. Which Larry, I love how you put that. It really is the long haul, and I think it strengthens married couples or couples in general, partners to a extent, because you're working towards the next goal of, after 4 or 5 years, we'll get the next house and we'll keep upgrading as our family gets larger. So, it really worked out very well for me with that mindset and communication with my spouse of that was the plan in order to do that. Even though it was small, it was our starter house, and it worked.
Right. That's a great example, Richard. And you're absolutely right, because it really comes down to communication. As you said, there's additional costs that you're going to have, and you want to factor those in. But as we start thinking about what are the financial challenges, I mean, Larry, you talked about the fact that the prices of houses are going up so high. The other thing that has happened over the last few years is that interest rates have more than doubled. Yep. That in those two factors really make it to where, from a practical standpoint and even from an emotional standpoint, make people feel like the American dream is potentially out of reach. So as we're talking about how do we help people look at these financial challenges, part of it is Richard talked about getting in on federal programs to help you in your first home. A couple other things you can do, and we talked about this, is having a solid down payment, which is not necessarily all of your money, right? Because you will need money to move in and things like that. But having a more solid down payment, which means setting that as part of your savings plan. And another thing you can do is you can actually, if you are working on your retirement account, one of the ways that you can actually withdraw money without a penalty, you will pay taxes on it. Say you take out 10 grand. You will pay the taxes on the 10 grand, but you won't have the early withdrawal penalty because it is your first time home. So you can utilize money that you've set aside so you don't have to take all of your liquid cash. And then I think another one to think about, my dad and my brother are both veterans, is they were both honorably discharged, and you can utilize the VA to help you get into your home without paying PMI. And so there's a lot of those savings that people just don't think about that they can do. So there's a couple of things in there that would help people maybe say, hey, this is actually closer than what I want. But coming back to the same thing, that your first home shouldn't be a 4,000 square foot manicured 5-acre property, potentially, especially if you're going to think about having kids and things like that. So it really comes down to that planning and stuff that we talked about earlier.
Very good. I'm also going to throw one website out there that people can go look at. It's called homepath.com. It is mainly for Fannie Mae, Fannie Mac, those government assisted programs where the government helps somebody get their first house. And for whatever reason, they ran into trouble and couldn't pay for it. So they had to take the house back. Those go well below market value most of the time. Now, you got to be careful. When I was buying my house here in Vancouver, I went in and talked to my real estate agent, told her what I was looking for, because I couldn't afford this market because it's really high priced moving out of Texas. So I said, I want to look for a house that is below market value. Did I have to do some work to get into that house? I sure did. The basement wasn't finished. They tore the sink out, blah, 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 blah. But those are just some cosmetic things I needed to do. The bones of the house are good. I got it well under market value, put the work in, and now I've got equity in that house to move forward. So I look at that site. They list a bunch of them, and then talk to your agent. Tell them what you're looking for. Because real estate agents and mortgage companies, believe it or not, want to get their top money out of you on their commission. And I'll just very shortly. So I got asked to move to San Francisco, California, out of Chicago when I was working for a big software company. And I said, well, I don't know that I can afford San Francisco. So I called a mortgage company. I won't say the name of it. And they said, oh, no problem, Larry. You qualify for $2 million. And I looked and said, who's paying that bill? That's nowhere in my budget thing. They said I could afford it. They granted it pre-approved. And I'm like, you lost your mind. So have some sense around your budget, understand a little bit about finances and literacy and what your cash flow is, because you may get offered something that's just not going to work in what your life is. So that's the other piece of advice. Yes, Tony.
Yeah, I want to emphasize something that both Richard and Debbie touched upon, and that's thinking about the total cost when you're purchasing a home. And this also applies to purchasing a car, is you have to think about property taxes. I know for us, that's raising our cost of house almost 20%. You have your homeowner's insurance, as Richard points out. You have your utilities. As Larry pointed out, you may have some home improvements that you want to do. So when you're thinking about the budget for your total home, if your dream home, it's going to be 500,000, then maybe think, of 600,000. So you have a buffer and make a budget for what that total cost is going to be, because it's never just the price of the home.
Charlie, is there anything that we can do when searching for a new home to not get so emotionally attached to the ones that you're looking at because you might not get it, and it's an emotional roller coaster. Sometimes when my ex-wife cried a lot when we didn't get, one house or two houses or anything like that. Is there anything we can do to like try to stay neutral on that and not get so emotionally attached to every single house we see and we love?
Just to be very practical on the valuation, especially if you're getting in a bidding war. I know like if a house is aesthetically pleasing or it's a nice location or you're planning to have kids and it's in a good school district, yeah, and there's a bidding war there, you can definitely get carried away and too attached. So it's really just not losing sight of the valuation and the fundamentals of the house, and if it gets too detached. And a big thing is, yeah, especially in the first house, is definitely be more conservative. And also like know your job security. I know a lot of people might assume that the amount of income they took in this year is going to be guaranteed in perpetuity. But let's say, God forbid, like some circumstances happen and you lose that job and you stretch yourself too thin to begin with, that can really make it difficult for you to continue to pay off the obligations on that house. So definitely taking all that into consideration, like how stable is my income, how much of it is passive, how much is it for my job, what's my job security, and taking all that into account because it is a big long-term burden, decade in most cases. So you have to really take all that into consideration and see, okay, look, what can I confidently pay off? What is more year to year? But also just never get too detached from the valuation and know ultimately what you're going to be more happy about in 20 years or so is that you got a good sound valuation in the house to begin with and you didn't get the house of your dreams, which if it's overpriced, isn't going to be the house of your dreams in a few years.
Also know your relationship with your partner when you're doing that. And the reason I say that is, one, I don't, until you've settled on what you really want, I don't take the kids when I'm shopping for a house or a car because it's new shiny toy for them. This is fantastic. Oh, look, it's got a pool, right? Whatever. Whether that pool works or not, you don't know. So that you get that emotional thing coming in from that age. And my wife is very emotional. She holds things on her sleeve, and I'm more stoic. So we got a game plan going in, and she taps me twice on the shoulder if she really likes something, but she doesn't say, "Oh, I love it," because right there, your negotiation power went out the window, right? So she taps me on the shoulder, and I just kind of stay stoic because that's the way I am. It's funny, I have friends that call me and say, "Hey, I'm gonna go look at some houses. You want to go with me so you can tell me if this is something I should be excited about or not?" And it's hard sometimes for people to say, I need a 3 bedroom, 2 bath house for my family and my kids. And then all the other things they walk in and all of a sudden they got an automatic dishwasher and they got all this and that and that and that, but they can't afford all that. So, kind of they get the thing like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. Can we be, and the real estate agents start, oh, I can bring the price down a little bit here, there. So going in with a really good game plan on a sheet of paper that says, these are what we need. This is what we would want, right? Needs and wants, going back to financial literacy training. really helps you get to what you really want. I want to thank everybody for today. I think the great discussion, great ideas. I can't express enough the gratitude for you guys taking the time today to do this, and for everybody paying attention and watching. Notice the points are overlapping. I think, we're halfway through some of this, or a quarter of the way through some of these topics. Communication with you and your partner is critical. Making sure you're keeping your kids aware of things at the age appropriate level is important. Let the community help you, right? It takes a community. Let the community help you. So if you're feeling a little lost, reach out to somebody, get some help, and try to stay on an even keel, especially when things are bad or good. Don't get splurgy. Stay mentally in a place when you're dealing with your finances that's from a good place. So thank you very much for all of that. Hopefully I summed that up pretty well. And you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll have the next session next week. And thanks for joining those that are watching. We really appreciate your time too.
To view the entire series, go to centralimpact.org.